Firstly, just a welcome to everybody who's turned up. I know time is money, and it's appreciated that you've devoted your time and implicitly money to actually get here. Do not lose sight of the fact of the building we are in. Now, this building personifies on many levels why Transport in New Zealand exists. Because what we are seeing is that the tentacles of government is encroaching more and more on what we do. And I suspect it is going to get worse before it gets better, because we now live in a world where Jandelnomics dominates. And Jandelnomics is more flip-flops from what the beach at Bondi. And we are now dealing internationally with a gentleman called Donald Trump, the most powerful president around the globe. And he represents a country that's got an incredibly strong poker hand. Unfortunately, Mr. Trump, I don't think, is the world's best poker player. I think he's the worst. And that's creating an awful lot of instability, volatility, and most people in this room, we're in an era which we call the Great Moderation, which was 1993 to the year 2000. And during the Great Moderation, the world played pretty nice. We had the GFC, we had the Asian crisis, we sort of cleaned those things up, but 9 years and 10 were good, and 1 year was crap. We now live in a world where rules has been challenged by power. We now live in a world where we don't just worry about interest rates, we're worrying an awful lot more about what the tentacles of government could or could not do. Has anybody been to the United States or the United Kingdom or Australia in the last 12 months? Because when you go to those countries and you talk to people in society and you see what is going on politically, you'll come back with a very upbeat view of New Zealand. Now, the average American is embarrassed about what's going on up there. You have a look in the United Kingdom, they're going to get their 7th Prime Minister in about 8 years. Across the Tasman, we've got Pauline Hanson coming up through the middle in regard to One Nation. We're going to see an awful lot of people from Australia, I think, whip over the ditch. Because, as Dom pointed out, New Zealand, despite a lot of the doom and gloom, has actually performed and probably dodged a little bit of a bullet over the past 3 to 6 months. Now, we've taken a bit of a hit, but the fact that we dodged that bullet comes down to the fact that I think this economy was a lot stronger than what people were openly acknowledging. It had a really good hum, and okay, if you live up in Auckland, or if you live in the Bay of Plenty, or if you're like me, you live in Wellington, you haven't been seeing much of a lovable economy. But if you're in the Wairarapa, you're down in South, then you're down in Otago, you're in Canterbury, by Christ, things are moving down in those districts. And we've got what's called a two-tiered economy, but it's a quality economy, because the farmers are making the money, and that's called earning a dollar before you spend a dollar. And we don't like these borrow and spend style recoveries, which we tend to see out of the Auckland property market. And we had this economic model for a long time of selling more expensive houses to each other. Just absolutely nuts. Now, this era we're now entering, and I think we've been entering this era since pre-COVID, we call it fiscal dominance or government influence. And it's been driven by political fracturing. We go to the far left or the far right. And that's dangerous, because what takes place is that we see a lot of flip-flopping in economic policy. And the biggest thing that businesses need out there is this thing called certainty, stability. So where we're in this era of fiscal dominance, you need to be on the game in regard to policy and advocacy. And I've talked about it in previous years as to this is what Transport in New Zealand really stands for. And we've restructured the organisation because at the heart of what we do, and to illustrate it, it's why we're here in this sort of building, because it is the core, the epicentre of the benefits that we deliver to members. And I know there's a whole lot of other benefits, and happy hour was 4:30, 5 o'clock. But in between, there's an awful lot of other stuff that we actually need to do and get across. Finally, Transport in New Zealand has been through, everybody knows, a bit of a restructure over the past sort of 18 months. Around the board, we needed to see some change. And the change I've elaborated on so far was really 3 stages. Well, I'm going to add a 4th stage because we're moving into the 4th stage. And stage number 1 was just looking at our strategy, where we were as an organisation. Did we need to make some tweaks? And the answer was yes, we needed to make some tweaks in regard to strategic direction of the organisation. And that was really upping the ante on policy and advocacy and recognition of the environment we now find itself in. And that environment is going to get more challenging because we're seeing more populism. Stage 2 was making sure Transport in New Zealand was fit for purpose. That was making sure that we had the right staff and we need to ask some hard questions. And that sort of stuff's not easy. And you've got to do that sort of stuff with a lot of dignity because that impacts people's lives. And of course now we've been in what's called stage 3. And stage 3 is about execution. Now, stage 3 is about getting runs on the board, showing to everyone in this room more member benefits, showing that we can deliver outcomes and align execution-wise with our strategy. There is a 4th stage which we're going to move into before the end of 2026. And stage 4 is the fun stage. Because people have heard me over the past sort of couple of years. I took this job and there was one overarching goal, and it was bring the industry together. It is absolutely nuts that we've got a number of different representative organisations, and the fun and games we're seeing out of a certain crowd around Nelson and Marlborough. It is our job to bring these organisations together. We cannot bring the organisations together if we were not strong as a goddamn ox to lead the way. And what I'm reporting out to you at the moment, we're moving into that stage where we're going to make serious challenges. You're going to see before the end of this year an upping of the ante from Transport in New Zealand in regard to trying to get towards the end game. Because the end game is consolidation across the industry. One voice, one industry. So watch this space, because I've talked about the first 3. You're going to see a tactical tilt, slight shift in strategic direction before the end of this year, because it's game on and is what we call the fun stage. Because there's going to be a winner out of this, and we've set Transport in New Zealand up to be that winner. Thank you.